Paul Mack here with my favorite farm tool, the Scythe. There are basically two kinds of scythes, the Austrian or the European scythe and the American scythe. It's kind of dangerous to bring up which is better, the American scythe or the European scythe, because again, you run the risk of getting beat up. I actually prefer the American scythe. Number one, I'm American. Both have pros and cons. One of the mistakes most people make with the American scythe, they don't get it quite sharp enough. This is an implement of shearing and not, whacking. And really, when it's well sharpened, you're talking about in this case, a 28-inch pocket knife. Mowing with a scythe is not so much a matter of brute strength. I mean, I don't have brute strength, come on. Endurance, yes, it's a matter of endurance. Can you do this one motion and take 6-inch steps for, 3 hours in a row? You've seen all kinds of probably different blades around, some very small and very wide, and some very long and very narrow. There's a reason for that. These shorter ones that are wider are generally for brush. You're cutting a ditch or whatever. You're not necessarily cutting hay or grain or anything, but you're cutting weeds, coarse woody weeds or brush or brambles or maybe even, small saplings. You would need a wider, stronger blade, and that weight, would give you a little more momentum for cutting that brushy stuff. And you don't need it very long, because obviously that brush is a stronger, more fibrous material than, say, hay or grain, the more fragile stems of hay or grain. And so these are mainly for brush. This one is 15-inch, I think. This one measured at about 14-inch, and it's got this looks pretty old. It's got some heavy metal, and it's riveted on there instead of just stamped. This one a little bit longer, 17-inch for brush or whatever. Now this one is it's probably more for hay, but it's a little wider than most I've seen, and it's 23 inches. But this one, the one I have on here, the one I use most often, is a 28-inch blade. And this one, I didn't realize I had this one until I was digging around yesterday. This one measures out at 38 inches. Can you see that? 38 inches. That's a pretty long one. So that would obviously be for fine hay, grains, things like that. And also, while we're on the subject, I don't know if you can see it up here. I'll show you a close-up here. I have a scythe in the corner that actually has a cradle on it. That long Freddy Krueger finger-like wooden spikes on it, that's actually called a cradle. And it has if I remember right, it's about 44 or 45-inch blade. I mean, it is a long dude. And if you ever see one of those long blades at a flea market, if it has that extra hole in it, like toward the heel end there, if you see that extra hole in a 44-inch blade, you can know that originally went on a scythe with a cradle. And those cradles are for cutting grain. And when every swath you make, the grain lays. When you're cutting hay, the hay will just fall everywhere after the scythe hits it. But with that cradle on there, the cradle catches the grain so that the grain all stays in a row. The heads of the grain is on one end, so that when you go to pick it up later and make a sheath, you don't have to rearrange it, and it's not a mess or anything. But basically, that's what those are for. Really cool. One day that'll be my favorite tool, just not today. Well, all tools are my favorite today, but we'll talk about the grain cradle one day probably. One of the reasons people get so frustrated with the scythe and say, that's hard work, you don't want to be doing that, is that they have never, they probably never used one, A. B, they've probably never used it, if they have, sharp enough. And that is the trick, as I've said, getting it sharp enough, because basically, like I said, you're talking about a 28-inch pocket knife. It needs to be that sharp for it to mow efficiently and to shear, because you're not, I mean, you could whack with a dull blade, but you're shearing almost like one edge of a scissors would be shearing paper. When you're sharpening, especially if you're taking a blade that has been out of commission for a while or has been dull and it's not sharp at all, you want to do a coarse sharpening. You've got to get your original bevel back. And these have bevels on both sides. Sometimes when you buy them, you may only see a bevel on one side, but when you go to sharpen it yourself, you really need to put an even bevel on both sides, not just one. And the best way to do that is, I have found, and I found this in a reprint of an old farm book, was a jig that they had fashioned, and this is really, really simple. It just consists of 2 long sticks, and obviously these are not the greatest sticks I could have found, but it works. And I have fastened here just a piece of metal with hole in the end, and what I do is I put a nail or a tack on the cedar post there that's in the center of the workshop, and I can stick that bracket on that nail so that it just kind of hangs on the nail. And then with my grinding stone over here set up, I can move that grinding stone, and this takes a little while to position it on the floor at just the right spot and just the right angle so that you get the perfect bevel right here. And as you have that set on that one spot, you just move it back and forth on that wheel as you're operating the wheel with your foot, and the bevel won't change. Now you could do your coarse sharpening in a vise, but it'd be difficult, and it's very hard to maintain that same bevel, the same angle for 28 inches. I mean, that's much easier to just do it this way. And when you get it on there, when you get one side done to that good bevel, then all you got to do is flip it over and work on the other side, and you get that same bevel on the other side. And so then, at that point, when you got the bevel on both sides back, it's not ready to go out and mow grass, because you'd be frustrated and you'd be writing me comments saying how bad the American scythe was. But after that, you want to hone it. And to hone the blade, you're going to need a little, well, I guess you could do it with any stone, but they make special stones for size. I guess you could use these for butcher knives or whatever. They're pretty handy, long Arkansas stone or whatever, very, very fine sharpening stone for honing knives or blades or whatever. And this is something you could do, you carry with you out in the field, because you're going to be honing it every few minutes once it gets slightly dull, and you can tell when it doesn't cut anymore. So after you get your main bevel with a grinding stone, which, by the way, that's one of the great things about those old grinding stones, and that's another one of my favorite tools. We'll save for another time. When I find them, I grab them, because I don't even know if they're being made anymore. I'm talking about the grinding stones with the square hole in the center. And so if you find one of those, grab onto it, because if you're into handmade hay with hand tools, that's a tool you're going to need, one of those old grinding stones, to get that coarse bevel. And then obviously one of these for honing, and you always want to sharpen toward the point of the end of the blade out that way, because that way all your little burrs are kind of pointed that direction, so that when you shear that grass, you've got all those little burrs acting for you. So you just work your way down the blade, acting pretty firmly. You're not babying it, but pretty firm little grind on it there. When you're starting out, please don't cut yourself, because it's very, very sharp. And that's, after your coarse grind, you might want to do that a few times. Just go back, start back at the end here, and go back and do it again. But you can go out and test it on the grass to see how you're doing. If it's still hanging up a little bit, not as smooth as you wanted at a slow speed, come on back and hone it again. But when you're out in the field, you know, you'll have this with you. By the way, I've got some, I'll show you this. I found, there's some other styles. There's one that's got a little more of a curve on it, like that. And this one looks to be a little coarser. So with one like this, you might want to, you know, do this after your coarse grinding stone and then follow up with something smoother like the Arkansas stone. And I found these at an auction. There were several of them still in the box, made by Aladdin. I don't see a date on here, but it looks pretty old. Whoa. Good for 25 cents. Oh, a remedy, tablets. What is this? They're selling something else. Looks like it's about 70 years old. Aladdin knife sharpener, nature's remedy. Good for 25 cents. The coupon's still in here. Hey, that's cool. A safe, dependable vegetable laxative. Good for 1.25 Aladdin knife sharpener. At time of purchasing a 25-cent size of nature's remedy. A safe, dependable vegetable laxative. Oh man, you got to buy a laxative to get the knife sharpener? So, when you're out in the field mowing, probably every 8 or 10 minutes, once you feel like it's not cutting as perfectly as it did, you'll want to take your stone, and for holding the stone, you'll want something to that'll fasten to your belt or to your overalls or whatever. You can take a gourd, kind of like dipper gourd. If you grow these dipper gourds, have the long nose on them. You know, sometimes when they grow on the ground, the nose will curve. But if they're hanging off a fence or whatever, it'll grow a straight little nose. You can cut those off at a little angle, drill a little hole in them. They will break. You know, you don't want to be rough with them. Put a little leather string on them, attach them to your overalls or your belt or whatever. And you'll want to put water in there and drop your stone in, and that way, as you're going, you just pull that out and do your honing, put it back in the water, and as you're walking around mowing, it's sloshing around, and the water kind of cleans the stone, gets it ready for the next use. The only thing about these little gourds, this is the poor man's stone holder, is that where the stem is, that's very porous, and so it will drip water, so you want to plug that up with some caulk or glue or whatever you want to do. The traditional holder for a honing stone when you're out mowing would be a cow's horn. You know, cow's horns are hollow, is what they make the powder horns out of, or the horns for fox hunting. Take you a good horn. Doesn't have to be long. Doesn't need to be really long, or you'll lose your stone down in it. Cut it off and put a hole in it so you can attach it, and that was the traditional thing to carry it around with. I want to talk to you about, about how to set the, just like with the nibs, you want to set them at the right angle for proper operation. Well, the angle of these blades can also be set with this hardware. That's why it's got these little holes here and here, because you can change that angle. And some of them have different designs. They have maybe 4 holes, so that you have a variety of ways you can set that, and that's to get a different angle. And that is important, and I'll tell you why. When you're mowing, let's see, how can I picture this? I need a long stick of some kind. A yardstick, that'll work. Now, pretend this is your snathe. You can set this blade at a different angle, but you can go outside and set your blade down on the ground and put a pencil right here at this end of the blade near the heel here, and then hold the snathe and naturally move it back this way, like you're pretending to get ready to take a cut there, a swath of grass. And you will note that the tip of this blade has moved away from the stake in the ground where the pencil was. the distance that has moved away is going to be the amount of grass you're going to cut in an arc as you take a swing. If the grass is tender stuff, if you're cutting very tender, easy to cut stuff, you might can get away with a wider, setting that angle a little wider so that you're cutting more grass with every cut. If you're cutting something coarse, let's see, in our area, Bahia grass is kind of a coarse, harder to cut grass. Or, of course, if you're cutting weeds or brush or something like that, you may want it a little more narrow so that you're not, spending much energy cutting that hard, fibrous plant. And so that's one way of setting that on the ground and getting that angle. And you'll want to, these blades have a little tip on them. They all have that little hook tip on them, and that hook is what goes in, these holes like this, or like this. So that would fit down into here. I don't think it's set. That would go down into here like that, and then this would go here for that angle, and it would go in that one for that angle. So you're moving it about that much right there, and then you would tighten down on that nut and get it really firmly in there, and that would be how to set the angle for your blade there. Now, if for instance, you're cutting a 6-inch swath or whatever, that's how big a step you're going to want to take with every cut, with every swath. So you're cutting 6 inches, take a 6-inch step with this foot, and then mow again, another 6-inch step, mow, 6-inch step, mow, standing straight. You don't want to hurt your back because you're going to be doing it for, like the next 4 hours, and continue to go that way. So if you're cutting a smaller swath, you're going to want to take a 4-inch step, or a bigger one, 8-inch step, or whatever. So those are the basics for the American scythe, just the basics. What a beautiful, beautiful tool. I've said before, I love tools that are part metal, part wood, and so beautifully curved, and it's got little handles on it, and you can take it and rework it and get it polished up, and put some linseed oil on the handle, get it all shiny, get it all sharp like a 28. Who owns a 28-inch pocket knife? Perhaps you someday. What a beautiful, beautiful implement this is. I think that's why there's so many paintings of haymaking and people mowing grass. It's just such a beautiful, idyllic, and really, yes, it's work. You're not going to get around the work aspect of it, but it's very relaxing. So if you're going to be doing something, you got to be doing something. So you might as well be doing work that's relaxing and beautiful and idyllic and somewhat romantic, to use such a beautiful tool. Getting out there with the sights and the sounds and mowing hay early in the morning. So with the American scythe. So I guess that'll about do for now. I'm Paul Mack, and until next time, I'll talk at you later. Your druggist has a limited number of Aladdin knife sharpeners. Get yours today. Just present this at the time of purchase of a 25-cent box of Nature's Remedy and get yours free. For constipation, headache, biliousness, I'm going to have to look that up. You'll be delighted. Aladdin has no equal as a knife sharpener. It works like magic. See description on the reverse side. To you, our customer, you're going to appreciate Nature's Remedy very much, as you will find by actual tests that Nature's Remedy will make you feel good and bring back that clear eye, clean skin, health that's worth everything. It corrects constipation and biliousness, avoids auto intoxication. I don't have a problem with that. Sick headaches, rheumatism, That's right around the corner, and helps the stomach. That never hurts. You are going to like your Aladdin sharpener too, for it will give you the pleasure of always having sharp knives. Won't you do some friend a favor? Give the attached Aladdin coupons to some of your friends or neighbors who failed to receive one. The favor will be appreciated. Tell your friends about Nature's Remedy and Aladdin today. Thank you. You're welcome. It's been about 70 years. I wonder if this is still good. Hey, I would love for you to subscribe to the Farm Hands Companion channel, or at the very least, share it with friends or family who are into farm stuff like we are. And feel free in the comment section to leave a comment about how much you love the American Scythe or hate it, whatever. And also, if you're 75 or 80 years old and you've ever tried Nature's Remedy, let us know how that went. We'll see you later. Thanks a lot.